Hello students, my name is Gandharva Hemant Pednekar, Research Associate, School of Development Studies, Tata Institute of Social Sciences, Mumbai. I will be discussing about the module on Growth and Distribution of World Population. In this module, we will learn about world population growth, especially how it is a 20th century phenomena, world population distribution, and spatial distribution of population. The world population growth accelerated during the 20th century as a result of technological and social changes, leading to a steep fall in death rates around the world. The century began with 1.6 billion people and ended with 6.1 billion. Most of the growth has occurred in the second half of the 20th century, as per Census of India 2011 report. The 2 billion count of population was reached in 1927, just before the Great Depression, and almost 123 years after the first billion. In 1960, only 33 years later, the world reached the 3 million mark, and the 4 billion mark came along only 14 years later, in 1974. The 5 million population mark hit after 13 years in 1987, and the 6 million milestone was reached after 12 years, that is in 1999. The decade saw the highest growth of world population. During the period 1900 to 1950, the average annual rate of world population growth was 0.8%. That rose to 1.9% during 1950 to 1970 period. Initially, that is, in the first half of century, both the developed and developing countries had identical population growth rates. But in the next 20 years, the population growth rate of the developing countries grew in an accelerating pace of little more than 2%. The population growth rate of developed countries was growing, but lower and slower than that of the developing countries. An important event in the first half of the century was the World War I, which lasted from 1914 to 1918. An international conflict that embroiled most of the nations of Europe, along with Russia, the United States, the Middle East, and other regions. The immediate effects of the births were greatly seen in the losses due to the excess deaths occurring on both the armed forces and the civilian population. The war affected births in the region during the war years. The average annual growth rate of population was 0.89% in this period in this part of the world, largely due to the war. With the Great Economic Depression, when people avoided getting married and having children during 1929 to 1939. The growth rate in countries of North America and Europe lowered to 0.75%. This decade experienced a global war for the second time for the span of 1939 to 1945. The war involved vast majority of the world's countries, eventually forming two opposing military alliances, the Allies and the Axis. The war is considered to be the deadliest in the human history. There were mass deaths of the civilians, which included the Holocaust and the strategic bombing of civilian cities, including the nuclear weapon used for the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The war resulted in an estimated 50 million to 85 million fatalities. The terms baby boom and population explosion were coined after the World War II. The baby boom occurred mostly in the countries which experienced tremendous damage from the war and were going through dramatic economic hardships. These countries mainly include Germany and Poland. From 1945 to 1961, more than 65 million children were born in United States. A child born every 7 seconds. Young couples who had put off marriage during the war started having after it got over. Government encouraged growth of families and cultural impact celebrated pregnancy, parenthood, and large families. Once the baby boom began, the average woman started getting married around the age of 20 instead of 22. This increase continued till 1956, after which a decline can be observed. The course of population growth rate was similar for North America as for Europe, but the growth rate was higher for later in this period. From 1920 onwards, the rates of population growth in Asia were rising. This persisted till 1970s, after which they again began to decline. The rates of population growth in the later half of the century showed a moderate increase in East Asia, very high in South Asia and Middle South Asia, and the highest in Western South Asia. Similar trend was observed for the Western, Eastern and Middle Northern African countries. The continent of Africa started having the highest records birth and death rates in the world. The countries of Latin America also experienced high growth of population after 1930 because of decreasing mortality levels, but continuation of high fertility rates. The natural increase was declining in the beginning of the 20th century for the continent of Australasia, but after the World War, the population growth rate increased. With the exception of the war years, the immigration to Australia and New Zealand continued to be very high. After the World War II, the health services of the underdeveloped and developing countries became much organized. Thus, the death rates all over the world continued decreasing. After 1950, Europe and North America had the lowest birth and death rates and the lowest rates of population growth, except for South Central Asia, where the rate of growth was as same as Northern America, but well above that in Europe. The rates were extremely high for Africa, Asia, and Middle and South America till 1960. Population growth continued to be high in the underdeveloped and developing countries, and a new problem of population explosion came into the picture. The birth rates in the underdeveloped countries were well above 40 per thousand, while in Europe they were well below 20 per thousand population. In North America, Oceania and the USSR, they were about 24 to 25 per thousand in this period. The death rates in these underdeveloped regions were higher than the Western standards. According to the United Nations World Population Prospects, the 1998 revision, 60% of the world population increase was contributed by 10 countries only, including India 21% and China 16% in 1995 to 2000. The top 10 countries of the world for this time period, other than India and China, included Pakistan, Indonesia, Nigeria, USA, Brazil, Bangladesh, Mexico, and Philippines. All of these countries in the world had a population of over 100 million in this time period. Specifically, when we look at the 21st century, the world population reached 6.1 billion in the mid-2000s. Most of the share of the population remained in the underdeveloped and developing regions of the world. In contrast, the population of the developed region changed minimally. The population in the less developed regions of the world remained relatively young, with children under 15 years of age accounting for about 28% of the population, and young persons accounting for about 18% of the population. In the more developed region, the children and the youth account for 16% and 12% of the population respectively. The working age population in the less developed countries at this period accounted for 2.6 billion, whereas that for the developed region was 608 million only. A new concern of more of aged population in the world was raised. The aging population above the 60 years of age started increasing at an annual rate of 1% per annum. In the less developed countries, this growth was more of about 3.7% annually in the period 2010 to 2015. The number of aged population surpassed the younger population of many countries. The global fertility level was 2.53 children per woman in 2005 to 2010. The developed region had a fertility level of 1.66 children per woman in the same time period. The 49 LCDs, that is least developed countries, at the time continued to have the fastest growing population in the world of 2.3% per year. The populations of 43 countries or areas were expected to decrease between 2013 and 2050. Of these, 40 were expected to continue decreasing between 2050 and 2100. Several countries were expected to see their population decline by more than 15% by 2050, including Belarus, Bulgaria, Croatia, Cuba, Georgia, Latvia, Lithuania, Republic of Moldova, Romania, the Russian Federation, Serbia, and Ukraine. Half of the population growth of the world concentrated in these countries: Nigeria, India, the United Republic of Tanzania, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Niger, Uganda, Ethiopia, and the United States of America. Fertility levels continued decreasing all throughout the world. About 32 developing countries reached the replacement level fertility in this time period. The HIV/AIDS epidemic continued to be one of the most important global health concerns. In Southern Africa, the region with the highest prevalence of the disease, life expectancy fell from 62 years in 1990-1995 to 52 years in 2005 to 2010. The region had shown increase in life expectancy. The major countries of destination receiving net immigrants in this period were USA, Canada, the UK, Australia, Italy, the Russian Federation, France, and Spain. The major countries of immigration were Bangladesh, China, India, Mexico, Pakistan, Indonesia, and the Philippines. Although the population of all countries was expected to age over the foreseeable future, it was predicted that the population will remain relatively young in countries where fertility was still high. The world population distribution shows that the 2015 revision of world population prospects is the 24th round of official United Nations population estimates and projections that have been prepared by the Population Division of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs of the United Nations. The world population reached 7.3 billion as of mid-2015, implying that the world has added approximately 1 billion people in the span of last 12 years. The distribution of the global population is highly dispersed within the 7 continents. Maximum of the world population of about 60% lives in Asia, that is about 4.4 billion, 16% in Africa, that is 1.2 billion, and 10% in Europe, 738 million, 9% in Latin America and the Caribbean, around 634 million, and the remaining 5% in Northern America, that is 358 million, and Oceania, that is 39 million. Within Asia, China is 1.4 billion, while India 1.3 billion remain the 2 largest countries of the world, both with more than 1 billion people, representing 19 and 18% of world's population respectively. The population of India is expected to continue growing over several decades in the future, like 1.5 billion by 2030 and 1.7 billion in 2050, while that of China will remain constant and later slightly decrease. Therefore, the population of India is expected to surpass that of China in future. The distribution of 10 largest populated countries in the world are 1 in Africa, Nigeria, 5 in Asia, that is Bangladesh, China, India, Indonesia, and Pakistan, 2 are in Latin America, that is Brazil and Mexico, and 1 in Northern America, that is United States of America, and 1 is in Europe, that is the Russian Federation. Amongst these, Nigeria's population, currently the 7th largest in the world, is growing most rapidly. With this present rate of growth, the population of Nigeria is projected to surpass that of the United States by 2050, at which point it will become the 3rd largest country in the world. By 2050, 6 of the 10 largest countries in the world are expected to exceed 300 million. China, India, Indonesia, Nigeria, Pakistan, and United States of America. Presently, 50.4% of the world's population is male and 49.6% is female. The median age of the global population, that is, the age at which half the population is older and half is younger, is 29.6 years. About 1/4, that is 26%, of the world population is below 15 years of age. 62% are aged between 15 to 59 years and 12% are 60 or over. According to the fertility levels, the countries of the world can be divided into 3 categories. About 46% of the world's population lives in countries with low fertility, where women have fewer than 2.1 children on average, like those of North America and Europe, and some 20 countries of Asia, 17 in Latin America and Caribbean, 3 in Oceania, and 1 in Africa. Another 46% lives in intermediate fertility countries, where women have on average 2.1 to 5 children, like in India, Indonesia, Pakistan, Mexico, etc. The remaining 9% lives in high fertility countries. These are Nigeria, Democratic Republic of Congo, Uganda, Afghanistan, etc. 83 countries had below replacement fertility during 2010 to 2015, and in the 25 of those countries, fertility was below 1.5 children per woman. The most populous countries with below replacement fertility are China, the United States of America, Brazil, the Russian Federation, Japan, Vietnam, Germany, the Islamic Republic of Iran, and Thailand, in order of population size. Mortality rates remain high for countries in war and having high prevalence of HIV/AIDS. In terms of aging, 12% of the world population comprises of aged population. The aging population is growing at 3.26% per year. Currently, Europe has its greatest share of aged population of about 24%. Except Africa, all other regions of the world will have a quarter of their population of over 60 years of age in the near future. In terms of in-migration, the high-income countries have attracted the maximum number of net inflow of the migrants of about 4.1 million migrants annually from lower and middle-income countries annually. Large-scale refugee movements have a profound influence on the level of net migration, including those affected recently by the Syrian crisis. It is projected that the migration additions to the population will fail to compensate fully for the decreasing births and the excess of death rates in Europe. Thus, Europe's population will shrink by about 32 million in the near future. 48 countries or areas are projected to experience population decline between 2015 to 2050. 11 countries are expected to see their populations decline by more than 15% by 2050, like Bosnia and Herzegovina, Bulgaria, Croatia, Hungary, Japan, Latvia, Lithuania, Republic of Moldova, Romania, Serbia, and Ukraine. While discussing the spatial distribution of population, we say that it means distribution of population by geographic areas or distribution of population by administrative and political areas like country, state, provinces, district, etc. It is generally measured by density of population, that is, number of persons living in per square kilometer or mile. The types of density are crude population density, that is ratio of population to area generally measured persons per square kilometer, physiological density, that is ratio of population to cultivable area, and agricultural density, that is the ratio of agricultural population or rural population to cultivable area. Figure gives the crude density of population at the world level. It may be seen that average density of population at the world level is 54 persons, lowest found in Oceania, that is 5, and highest in Asia, that is 138 persons per square kilometer. The density of population has been rising at the world level and also in most of the countries. It rose from 24 in 1961 to 54 in 2015. Some of the smaller states and territories show a very population density. For example, Macau SAR, that is Special Administrative Regions, China, shows as high as 19,293 persons per square kilometer, followed by Monaco, which has approximately 18,866, and Singapore 7,807, and Hong Kong SAR of China 6,958. On the other hand, countries like Canada and Australia have population density 4 and 3 persons per square kilometer respectively. In India, population was 361 million in 1951, which increased to 1210 million in 2011. The population growth rate reached a peak during 1971 to 81, with an annual growth rate of 2.2% per annum, while the recent census decade showed an annual growth rate 1.6%. Similarly, density of population, which was 117 persons per square kilometer in 1951 at the time of independence, increased to 382 in 2011. India accounts for 2.4% of the world's surface area and supports 17.5% population, compared to USA comprising of 7.2% of the world's surface area and 4.5% population of the world. In South Asia, only Bangladesh has higher population density compared to India. Among the states of India, Bihar has the highest density of population, that is 1102, and Arunachal Pradesh the lowest, that is 17, according to 2011 census. In conclusion, we can say that population density is closely associated with development process, particularly agricultural development. If accompanied by diversification of economy, density is a good indicator of agglomeration, division of work, diffusion of ideas, and innovation, as argued by Esther Bosrup in 1965. If not accompanied by diversification of economy, infrastructural development, and rising productivity, it could lead to huge pressure on the environment. Thus, increasing density without development is a huge challenge for policy makers. Thank you.